Welcome.
Never knowingly diplomatic. We're just a bunch of twats. Charming and charismatic. Fuck that shit with the aristocrats. Inconsequential, autocrats. Yeah, that's right, with the aristocrats, bitch.
Welcome once again to episode 5 of The Aristocrats. The show that, rocks everybody's fat asses and happens every 2 weeks on Fridays, usually at 7 Eastern and midnight. What time zone is that? Some other time zone? The time zone of like the other, part of the world that, engages in this weird thing that we do. And the topic for today's show is the animals and me, non-human rights and interspecies ethics. So I'm excited to talk about this because I took an ethics class, and the topics were interesting, and I never really got to visit it really beyond that. And so I did a little bit of research, and I have a bunch of tabs open, and I'm ready to tackle this in every way, shape, or form. But I, Christopher Mowdy, am merely your co-host through this phenomenon that is the Aristocrats' 5th episode. The other co-host is Alex Botten, and he's right there with Kat.
Hello. We're here in the lovely UK. You have Kat.
And we're gonna do that kind of voice for the rest of the show. I'm into it, man.
I'm gonna do this kind of voice.
Please don't be. No.
And we have our panelists. Of course, the lovely, talented, and beautiful Fiona. How are you, Fiona?
Fiona's muted.
I'm absolutely wonderful. Hey. Confused but wonderful.
Okay, yeah, just like the rest of us then. All right, good. And as well, in addition to Fiona, we have Mark. How are you, Mark?
I'm fine, thank you. Chris, yourself?
I'm doing well, man. Once again, I'm so glad that you got a new mic. Makes a difference.
I'm glad I forced him. I begged him to get a mic.
You're sounding pretty clear there, Mark. You're sounding good.
It's my perfect English. No,
it's like you're in the room with us.
That's even scarier.
It's like, you remember the beginning of I Just Can't Stop Loving You by Michael Jackson? The beginning of that I think I've talked about this before, haven't I? He had a little whispery section.
How did that go again?
I just can't stop loving you.
Oh yeah, I remember it now.
And at the beginning though, it's like this. It's like, hey there, I'm watching you sleep. And it's like so close in your ear. It's like, I remember hearing it late at night, listening to the album chart. Yeah, it was the album chart show with Paul Gambaccini, and he played the beginning of it, and he was like, and coming up now is the latest one from Michael Jackson, and this is I Just Can't Stop Loving You. And at the beginning it's like, I'm watching you sleep. I'm right next to your ear. And it's like, in stereo, super close mic. You're like, oh, Jesus, Michael Jackson's in the back. Yeah.
That's a great Michael Jackson song. So I'm going to hand it over to Alex because I think that he has the itinerary of how the show is going to be played out in mind, and if he doesn't, you better think of one fast.
I've got it in mind, Christopher. It's the standard shape of the show. We'll talk some shit about what's going on in the news for maybe 10 minutes. I've actually got round to making the video what's happened in YouTube this week. Again, it was another one of these where I thought, I'd be bothered. But then I was walking back from the tram and inspiration struck and I worked out how to do it. So I made a little video. It's a bit longer, so if anybody needs to take a piss during that bit, you can. It's hopefully not going to be particularly flaggable now. That's just a little private in-joke for those of us who've been watching the online drama this week and are simply delighted at the outcomes of this evening. So hopefully it talks a little bit about what's been going on. It covers a little bit about the chocolate atheist is in there. There's a few other things, and it's a little story really. It's kind of almost like an actual article. And in typical form, it is just 4 minutes of me ripping off Charlie Brooker. So it's just how it is. And then after that, we have the discussion about animals and ethics with my lovely wife Catherine. Catherine kind of And
Came up
everybody's-
with it yet again.
Yeah. So-
I am nothing but the person who comes up with everything around here.
She's the lady of ideas. And Peter isn't with us tonight, again, because
he's
this
on the
time he's
boat.
in the Timor Sea, apparently.
Was it for that plane?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, he's dived down there. He's gone to collect. He's just gone down without any diving equipment to get the black box recorder because that's how tough he is because he's an Aussie. They were like, Peter, don't go in there without the gear. And he's like, no worries, mate. He just jumped in like this, like that. Swam down 4 kilometres all the way to the bottom, grabbed it, and went, Ripper, job's a good one, and swam up to the top again. And
I do wonder
Came
whether
out.
Peter's just sitting there going, they're so racist.
yeah, he's come out. No, that's not racist. He comes powering out of the water, and they go, "Yay, Peter! Woo!" So that's what he's doing. I'm imagining. So that's what I think is happening there. So yeah, so that's where he is. So what's been happening in the news then? I got typing here. Ooh, yes, and you can review your article. Yes, Chris has an article that he wants to review after the video. Is this the one that's the PowerPoint?
That was awesome. That was a good way of reading what I wrote and then explaining what I wrote in exactly the same terms that I used.
Almost exactly the same words. Yeah.
It was great, man. He has a video, or I'm sorry, he has a review of an article that he wants to do after the video.
Yeah.
Good.
And the he that you're talking about, you're doing a slightly Jason Bourne-esque talking about yourself in the third person there.
Said
that's
article.
great.
Ooh,
Just a
highlighter.
PowerPoint presentation, just to show you how big of a nerd I am.
Have you got a pointer or anything like that as well, Chris?
Unfortunately not. It doesn't come with like a built-in one. The one on the iPad did. When you used to have a Keynote on your iPad, well, even still, when you have Keynote on your iPad and you plug it into something that displays it, when you tap on the screen, a little red laser pointer shows up on the projector so that you can just like circle things and outline things and point to things. And it's
Draw a big-
awesome.
I'm
Yeah,
getting a bit
it's-
overexcited here.
Okay, well let's cut to the chase though, because Kat did just tell me a moment ago to get on with it, didn't you? Did we introduce Kat, by the way, this evening?
Yes,
We
just
did.
get on
Okay.
with it.
Bit of news that I noticed: the World Health Organization is pointing out that we may be about to enter a post antibiotics world, or to put it another way, we may be thoroughly fucked.
Drug resistant
Kat's laughing.
bacteria.
Yes. The resistance has happened because, partly because a lot of doctors don't seem to understand how evolution works, and don't seem to understand, and patients don't understand. And that's the most important thing: is the patients don't get it. So people aren't finishing their courses of antibiotics, which are causing drug resistance to build up. And in practically every part of the world now, resistance to major drugs is starting to kick in. The World Health Organization has basically said we're in big trouble. So, as I posted on Facebook earlier this week, that's going to really cause a lot of problems when World War III kicks off in August. So,
There will not be World War III in August.
yeah, when Russia's, I think we talked about this last time, didn't we? When Russia's caused World War III in August, those of us who survive that are going to have some problems with getting better from illnesses such as things that we could have been cured by with antibiotics. And that's my take on the news.
Yes.
Anybody else got anything?
No, that's about it. We have been joined, however, by a guest by the name of Ian, who
Hello, Ian.
seems to not have his mic working. We cannot hear you, Ian. Fix yourself, or semaphore.
It'll work well in the video version, the semaphoring. The audio listeners, which have been quite bad uploading it. Sorry, audio
Can you
listeners.
see whether or not Ian is muted?
He's not muted. He's not muted.
It's not muted.
Oh, he was muted then, and then he's unmuted.
No,
You-
there's
you
no
may have to-
sound.
If you click on the cog, you may have to. There's a little cog in your settings. You may have to click on that and choose the right input device. It's kind of there on your screen, up there somewhere. So I'm kind of pointing where it should be on your screen. I realised I'm not even going to drink. I'm going to die of thirst up here.
Oh, beverage you at some point there.
Yeah,
Get
thank
that for now.
Uh,
Well, we can go on to your exciting video while
We'll
Ian
play the video
figures out
now,
his
but-
poor.
Before we do that, does anybody else have any news they want to talk about before we start that?
No, I've got nothing now.
Nothing. I'm the only person who's brought any news to the show this week.
Well,
I even-
the
Subject.
only
ahead.
news I have is that given the events of about 30 minutes ago, I have sat down and I've put slap on in celebration.
Don't make me get all tarted up again, Fee.
Did you laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did a happy dance. You know, the Snoopy dance.
Oh my god.
No, it's absolutely the right thing to have done because it needed to be done. It was, you know, it was time. It was time for the happy dance to be done. I'm trying to get this sound to do other things. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you.
Oh, now you're on the other ear. How strange.
Look at you.
Hey.
Yeah.
I'm being attacked by a kitty.
I'm trying to get audio to do things that it should. You see.
Yeah.
Getting it ready for the next page. Okay. So. Well, what I'll do then is I'm going to play in the audio thingy, the little video clip. Again, if everybody can mute themselves, that would be fantastic. What I do need to do is actually get all this working again, because I did switch it all off a moment ago. Oh, what an idiot I am. Let's see, so I now need to go back into my sound. You see, this is it. Every time I say that we ought to have like a team of dudes backstage doing all this, but we don't have a team of dudes.
Do you think we could, you know, hijack the New Covenant group?
I think we could get some of the New Covenant group to come and do this for
Listen,
us.
I can't make any promises. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think. Okay, now I'm having to open a folder called audio setups so that I can work out how to do this. What a sado I am.
You're so professional.
You'd think. Now, I mean, I started using this technique to get to play audio in back in when? September last year? You'd think I'd know how to do it by now. But
Alex, you didn't know your own mobile phone number for over a decade.
That's true, I didn't. But who needs to know their own mobile phone number?
You.
Everybody.
I don't ever call myself.
No,
But you have to tell other people how to
you?
call you.
Yeah, but
See,
then I just
Chris is
send.
smart.
I ask them what their number is, and I send them a text.
Mhm.
And go there.
Very
You go.
selfish.
There's your number.
That's a very selfish way of eventually not remembering your own friggin' number for 10
Phone
years.
idol.
I think it's.
Yeah. Oh, no, what's yours? What's yours? No, oh, who cares about what mine is? You'll get it in 5 seconds. What's yours?
Yeah, that's it, exactly. And then I get theirs.
What happens if they don't know it?
If they don't know their number, then it's never to be. It wasn't meant to be, was it?
Yeah.
So, evidently.
Oh, so it's what's good for me but not for thee? Oh,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
all right. Because if everybody followed that, nobody would be able to exchange numbers.
In the land of the man who doesn't know his own mobile number, wow, that's getting loud. Jesus. Oh. Good Lord, hold on. Turn the
What
gain
have
down on
you
that.
Do
done?
not make me tell another joke.
Okay, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Cool. And Ian's back and looking completely confused and wondering what he's got himself into.
Still can't hear him.
Still can't hear you, buddy.
Right, so everybody,
Hear us?
I can't hear him, but I now need to open the video for the. We've got 2 computers to do this.
So here's something that has absolutely nothing to do with our topic. So a popular actor showed up at the place that I work because apparently he's anosmic, and he's going to be like the face of this, hopefully, movement to for like anosmia awareness.
What does
And so that was cool. What's that?
I don't understand the word you just said.
Oh, anosmia. I'm sorry. Anosmia is a no sense of smell.
Oh, like my mum.
Oh, your mom doesn't smell.
She can't smell.
She smells lovely, though.
Well, it depends on the way you say it, Kat. If she doesn't smell, that means that she doesn't give off an aroma.
Well,
If she's
I smell.
incapable of smelling.
smelling things.
Okay, all right.
Which
I
apparently
definitely smell.
Does it?
Horses and
False
feet.
definitions.
if you hold your nose when you're drinking something gross, you don't taste it as much, so you
Okay.
can't smell.
I'm hoping you're not.
Still
It just
can't
doesn't
hear
have as
you.
much flavor.
Oh shit! Hold on. Yes. Sorry.
Shit.
It's working.
Is it working?
I'm going to call Dr. Jones as soon as we're done with this.
Let's say, Dr. Jones, please have me back. Oh
Oh,
no, that's wrong. That's not actually the case. Where's my fucking controls?
stop swearing.
Sorry, it's a sweary one this week.
Right.
Okay. Right, okay, let me just get rid of everything. Let me have, oh for God's sake, let me have the damn controls back, please. Okay, I'm going to make this go full screen. Everybody just mute your mics and see if we can actually make this work. There we go. Start screen share. So there we go. There's me sitting on top of a pair of steps.
Pair of steps.
Steps. I'm on some steps.
Ah,
There I am on some steps.
That's all. Yeah.
Oh, wait, now why? There we go. Now stay. No, don't disappear. What's happening here is the
always good to add these in post.
yes,
Yes.
it'd be much easier. Okay, so it only stays there if I'm on the other screen. Oh my god, that's ridiculous. Right, got it. Okay, so I needed to grab hold of the transport. So
There we go. Magic.
okay, I'm going to mute my mic. I'm going to play this in, then I'm going to run downstairs and grab a drink. So everybody else, mute your mics. And here's this week's YouTube news. Yes, it's that time of the week again where we talk about things that are happening on YouTube. Things like this. And scenes that can only really be described as thoroughly unedifying. Fundamentalist Loon's corner of the internet seems to have gone batshit insane during the last 2 weeks. We had Brett Keane, a kind of Cthulhu-esque ancient evil from the distant past of YouTube, re-emerging from his latest permanent banning to unleash a blizzard of bullshit that briefly threatened to engulf the entirety of the great debate in needless and quite unpleasant drama, who, mere weeks after emerging into our dimension by oozing through the haunted mirror where he'd been trapped by the Shredder, Straight Dope and the Amazing Atheist, was reduced to turning on his own, labelling them morons and sociopaths, before going on to lament his own lack of ability to judge character.
That's why I have a bad situation as it is for myself on the internet, because unfortunately I gave people the benefit of the doubt for years, and I continue to be a bad judge of character. I keep connecting and associating myself with people who end up turning out to be either idiots or scumbags.
The only way that this whole sorry mess could have been rendered even funnier would have been that if, after being stung in a 2-hour virtual ass fucking at the hands of the drunken peasants, everyone's least favourite YouTuber had reached back out to those same morons and sociopaths after being accused of throwing them all under the bus, which he did 2 days later. The artist, formerly known as Richard Raspberry, was also maintaining a high profile, squeaking out an apology on a show hosted by the Awesome Crew, before being one of the victims of the mighty BK's rage and the benefactor of his sudden forgiveness.
I apologise for the way I've conducted myself, and I want to apologise to you for things I've said and done. And I hope that you can accept my apology.
But if there's one true believer who undeniably caused the wheels to fall off the Jesus-powered clown car this month, it was G-Man. In a move that I'm guessing even the Son of God would have trouble forgiving, G-Man picked Easter Sunday to tell the whole world that he'd lost his faith. Appearing without his hat and coming across as calm and rational for the first time ever in a video, Gary, as his mum called him, spoke humbly about how he'd been convinced that there was no compelling evidence for the existence of God, and how he was now probably an atheist. Oh, and that he was no longer to be known as G-Man, and now chosen to be called the Chocolate Atheist.
God is hearing me. I mean, I've been around people who have been smarter than me for a while now. You know, and now I've come to the conclusion that I don't think God exists. I think I'm an atheist because of it.
This caused a mixed reaction from the online community, with some atheists welcoming him with open arms, others immediately calling bullshit, whilst a few urged caution and suggested we should see what happened next before making any snap judgments. What happened next was spectacular.
Earlier, he called me up on Skype and he stated that he was joking, that he was doing this for the point of reactions, and that he was somehow going to be able to point out, make some kind of argument on why it is that he did this. I do not wish to see him make a video pointing out that he did this thing that literally I feel is bearing false witness or has lied.
Blowing the gaff wide open, Brett Keane posted a video claiming that G-Man had called him to explain that the whole thing was an elaborate lie, something that Keane was, ironically, unwilling to put up with.
G-Man followed this with an epic hangout where he revealed that he wasn't in fact the chocolate atheist at all, but was really the lying cuntbag theist who had fooled everyone with his amazing acting in an attempt to destroy the no true Scotsman fallacy. A fallacy it rapidly became clear he didn't understand. As true believer after true believer lined up to tell him that he'd been a massive prick, some even weeping openly as they shrieked at him, G-Man still failed to understand that he'd done anything wrong, and boasted about how clever he'd been, something he was still doing the next day when he tried to claim that he hadn't been lying, but had been merely playing a part, like Kurt Cameron in the Left Behind movies. It wasn't until the next day that the penny dropped, and he started to confess to his error, drawing a curtain over a fortnight of unrivaled online lunacy.
And that was Alex's video that I finally got to play. I hope everybody enjoyed it. It was 4 minutes of pretty awesome stuff and entertaining. I was laughing hysterical. And yeah. Is there anything you want to follow up with that video on? Anybody on the panel, including Kat and Alex?
I missed out on so much. I didn't know any of this happened. I saw that G-Man said he was an atheist, but anything else I haven't paid any attention to.
Oh, it's got even better this evening.
Has it?
It's been quite spectacular. Let me kill all this extra stuff. See if we can make that a bit better. Oh, there's so much crap.
Yes,
Are you able to hear things normally now, Alex? Have you made the switch from the video to, like, broadcast mode?
He's got a confused look on his face.
I'll take that as a no.
Can't hear you. All right, so I'm going to take this opportunity to start talking about the paper that I have here. Alex, your lips are moving, but I can't hear you, just so you know. I hope you can hear us. Or maybe he just can't. He's oblivio. So I happen to look up some psychology of religion stuff. Are you there, Alex? Is that you?
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Yes. One day I'll get this. You know what I'm going to do in a couple of weeks' time? I'm going to write some scripts to just make all this happen. I don't know how I'll do that, and I don't know really what a script is, but I'll make it work.
Yeah, there has to be like a macro or template that you can just like make things push button easy. There has to be a way.
It has to be, because it's ridiculous.
Or you can just hire the rest of the New Covenant crew.
Yeah, something like that. But something will work.
The New Covenant Wranglers.
But yeah, so you've got your paper you wanted to quickly go through.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to make this as succinct as possible. So I have a paper in front of me by the name of "Testing the Love Thy Neighbor Hypothesis: Religiosity's Association with Positive Attitudes Towards Ethnical, Racial, and Value-Violating Outgroups." Now, since I've read the article a couple times, that title pretty much tells you exactly what it's about, but you would kind of need to disassemble a lot of the terms. And for that, Alex, if you could click on my icon so that everybody can see my screen share while I'm
You've
talking.
got it full screen. You're full screen. You rule the roost there.
Hello, everybody. And let's see if this works. Okay. So, does everybody see what I'm seeing? This picture here? Okay, so there's the title. This is in the journal Psychology of Religion and Spirituality. It's from 2013, and those are the authors. And this is essentially the model that they tested. So if you look on the far left, they pretty much, and if you look at the far left bottom, I always include the N on each slide just so that we can keep in mind how many people, and the N is the amount of people that participated in this research.
Hopefully the number of people, otherwise they've been put through a blender. So on the far left, there's the religiosity component, and that was measured in ways that I'm going to tell you about. And in the middle, they determined a variable called cognitive rigidity, and they did that with a test called the right-wing authoritarianism factor. And I'll talk about that in a second. So that's in the middle. And on the far right are the two outgroups that they wanted to study. The one on the top is ethnical racial outgroups, and that's pretty obvious what that is. And the bottom is the value violating outgroups. So that's pretty much the LGBTQ community, atheists, and anybody who doesn't support their values. And as you can see, the arrows are pointing everywhere, just to show you things and stuff. So let me blast through this. On the far left, about religiosity, the way that they measured intrinsic religiosity, and they measured it by making a factor out of these three components: intrinsic religiosity, religious behaviors, and general religiosity. And here's a little example of how they did that. To measure intrinsic religiosity, they had a 9-question questionnaire, and the questions were of this style: my religious beliefs are what really lie behind my whole approach to life. And you can either agree to disagree with them on a Likert scale. Moving on to the religious behaviors, they took the average of the scores of how often do you attend a religious service, how often do you read sacred text, and how often do you pray or meditate. They just took an average of those three things, and that was the religious behaviors factor. And the general religiosity, the third one, was essentially a one-question score, and this is the question: to what extent do you consider yourself a religious person? So that's how they measured religiosities in these 249 people. To get this cognitive rigidity score, there was a 10-question questionnaire, 3 of which the questions deal with a factor of aggression, 3 of which deal with submission, 3 of which deal with conventionalism, and then 1 that asks something other than these 3 things to kind of pull it together. Once again, RWA stands for right-wing authoritarianism. So the aggression factor were questions like: there are many radical, immoral people trying to ruin this country whom the authorities should put out of action. The submission variable was: what our country needs most is discipline, with everyone following our leader in unity. And then conventionalism, which you see at the bottom there was reverse scored, was a positive statement. Everyone should have their own lifestyle, even if it makes them different. So this is how they, these are the 3 factors that they looked at from the score. And if we look at just the correlation, and on the far right, they just, I'm not going to go into that. They just had positive attitude questions about these 2 different out groups, and then they did a correlation. So what you can see is the top number, negative 0.385, that's the Pearson's R correlation factor. It has 3 stars next to it. That means that it's significant at a p-value, which is the way that you determine the criteria whether something's significant, at the 0.001 level, which is very much so. So that's a negative. They're negatively correlated. The higher you score on aggression, the lower your positive attitude is of ethnic and racial outgroups. If we go to the second number, negative 0.255, same rule applies. It's negative correlation. The higher your score is on aggression, the lower your score is on positive attitudes towards value-violating outgroups. And then the third score, negative 0.559, same thing applies, except it comes from the conventionalism factor, right? Moving on. If you control for those factors, right, because the solid lines on the upper right-hand side are the mediated paths, which means that, once religiosity is mediated through this cognitive rigidity, then these are the scores that you get. But if you control for that and do an analysis, a correlational analysis that controls for that cognitive rigidity, you all of a sudden see that religiosity, as it affects the top score, as it affects positive attitudes towards ethnic and racial outgroups, is now significant in the positive direction, meaning the more religious you are, the more positive attitudes you have. And at the bottom, as religiosity in general, as it's controlled for by cognitive rigidity, affects value-violating groups, there's a very, very slight positive correlation, but it's not significant, so for all intents and purposes, there is no effect. Here's the conclusion that they drew, and then I'm going to give my opinion of it and then open it up to the panel. They say, namely, cognitively rigid ideologies serve as a suppressor variable and fully mediate, which means diminish, the relationship between religiosity and positive attitudes. Thus, and then here's the part that killed me, thus internalizing religiosity, for example, love thy neighbor, is positively associated with positive attitudes or liking of ethnic racial outgroups, whereas aggressive, rigid cognitions associated with religiosity are negatively associated with positive attitudes towards outgroup members. And then at the bottom is just kind of a reiteration of the same thing, but I'll go over the main points. In this study, we found that once controlling for the rigid ideology, right-wing authoritarianism, religiosity's relationship with positive attitudes towards ethnic racial groups was fully mediated, such that it became a positive, statistically significant positive correlation. And then the results from the present study provide evidence that viewing religion as important and engaging in religious behaviors might be associated with a liking of ethnic racial outgroups. Here's the part that I don't like. Being closed-minded and cognitively rigid, however, is inversely associated. So they're kind of blaming it on a closed-minded, cognitively rigid thing, whereas they were saying that, you know, religiosity wasn't a factor. That's the main point. So now that that's said, let me turn this bad boy off and be back. Okay, here's my complaint about the results. They left atheists out on purpose, which makes sense because they wanted to figure out how religiosity correlated with those variables. So why would they include atheists? But the conclusion that they came to, was pretty much we should start using religion so that people in society have better attitudes, more positive attitudes towards ethnic racial outgroups, right? At least that's how I'm reading it, based on, you know, the results and you know, having read it a couple times. My problem is, since they left the atheists out, I would be curious that if you had 249 or 250 atheists answer the same questions with a different cognitive rigidity factor, would there be a significant difference between the two groups, the atheists and the people who have religiosity? If not, for all intents and purposes, they're the same group. Or another thing that can be said is one group, like religiosity, cannot be promoted as more conducive to achieving the endpoint of having positive feelings, which is kind of what the paper says. So I'd like to open it up to the panel. Any complaints about the methodology, questions about anything? I only want to spend a couple minutes on this. I just thought it was an interesting article.
The first thing that strikes me about it is not including atheists. I mean, atheists would have been the perfect control for that study.
That's a good point.
Because they would not, nothing could be put down to their religiosity. So they would have been an ideal negative control.
Who would be the negative control? I'm sorry, I was busy trying to find it.
The atheists.
But here's the thing.
Because it couldn't be put down to religiosity there. Therefore, you would be looking at the effect of religiosity.
Here's the thing that I was thinking about, because I was thinking, like, how would we have a control for this with atheists? But atheism, I don't think we could use the Dawkins atheism scale so much, do you? Because we need to have a continuous scale in order to do correlations with. So it can't be like yes or no. Like, do you believe in God? No. Well, if everyone scores 0, then there's no correlation to be had. Yeah. But if you had a scale of, let's say, philosophical naturalism, well, all right. Well, to me that would be the same thing. But then again, I'm an atheist who is a philosophical naturalist, so maybe I'm a little biased.
I am anything saying to add.
It is very interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah, I mean, well, here the reason why they did this research is because there is a theory of religiosity being negatively or positively correlated with negative attitudes, and most of the studies that have tried to look at how religiosity factors into outgroups, it's always been asking them negative questions and how negative they were, and doing correlations of negative opinions. And what the value of this study was, they asked questions about positive things, so that, you know, any correlation, any statistically significant correlation that happened, they can say, yes, oh, well, religiosity, you know, you might think that it is highly correlated with negative things, but it's also highly correlated with positive things. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that was clever. That was a clever way of using statistics. Yeah. So, and that could be the end of the conversation. I just wanted to give this a shot.
I come out, it's like, it could be the end.
I feel like it kind of, I went slightly over my head. Also, because I was doing a load of technical stuff at the same time.
I just want to talk about the animals.
So, yes.
Well, here's my little springboard. So, this article is about outgroups, and we're going to talk about the ultimate outgroup, non-human animals and the way that we should treat them ethically.
There you go. Woohoo! Springboard.
Bam!
Segue.
Yeah. We're
So
getting
yes,
smooth at
and
this.
we now have Ian working.
Yeah.
We like it when
Yes.
Ah,
So welcome. Hello.
my
Basic-
pleasure. Thank you for inviting me onto the show.
No, you're very welcome. I'm going to make Alex do a bit of the technical hoobly-doobly because it's his computer, but
What do you want me
would
to
you
do?
mind pulling up the first of those two
Okay,
comics?
those
the one with
cartoons, yeah.
Douglas and the
Yeah.
bird feeder things, the other one.
Oh, is it the other one? This one
First.
here. All right, yeah, these Conan Cal cartoons. Okay, so I need to put it
So
to
I'm just
here,
going to pull it over so
and
you
then it
can
needs
show.
to be
Basically, what got me thinking about this whole subject was last time, or the time before, we had a discussion about the future, and there was some discussion of aliens and other sentient species out in the universe at large, and obviously we are sort of prone to thinking of extraterrestrials and sentience and things like that when we talk about it.
Yeah.
However, I have for some years now read a comic by the name of Kevin and Kel, which is anthropomorphized. So all the characters are animals. However, one of the odd things about it that you don't tend to see in a lot of anthropomorphized comics is the fact that there is a predator-prey relationship, which means sentient animals are eating sentient animals.
Yeah.
And it seems all sort of fluffy and lovely most of the time. However, I actually saw a comic recently that sort of got me thinking. And so just I want to pull up this first comic just to give you guys an idea of the characters.
Before I do that, I will point out that we are using these comics under the fair usage
Yes.
thing, just so in
Thing,
case
like that
in case
thing.
there'd be copyrights and sort of goes about it. Anything we use in the show is under fair use.
And we do give
And it is, yeah.
sort of credit to Bill Holbrook for drawing them.
So
And they are excellent and entertaining.
here's the first one, and I'll
So-
just make sure I'll keep this with the screen.
It's not hugely important who the people are, though. Just for the record, the squirrel that's talking to the bunny is the boyfriend of said bunny. Bunny is the grandmother of a character you'll see in a second, and that's really all you need to know is that she is in a relationship with a squirrel, which all that matters here.
Sounds legit to me.
Herbivore, love.
So that's that. So that's all we
Yes.
need for that one. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to introduce the fact that
Okay, let me
that
get
Coney's grandfather creature is a squirrel.
This is where it gets fucked
This
up.
is where this kind of, when I was reading it, I was like, this is a lot darker than you would actually really think about. I'll get Alex to share
Here we
this
go.
one up.
And this is what we're talking about. Hopefully you'll be able to read that because it is kind of messed up. Do you want to talk?
Basically, when you read it, you tend to forget that Fiona's reaction was the same one I had, which is for a fluffy, happy cartoon, the fact that there are a whole bunch of predator children using squirrel entrails to do a maypole is actually really dark, considering that that little bunny girl is the sort of step-granddaughter of the squirrel from the previous comic. And so it got me thinking about the idea of sentient creatures eating each other. And the fact that if we were in a situation where we were co-workers with the creatures we then ate, that would be something that would be fairly disturbing to the human psyche. And that got me thinking about the fact that dolphins give each other names. There's a whole, I mean, as far as I'm
Parrots
concerned,
do as well,
I mean,
yeah.
there's this whole span of the animal kingdom that obviously, if they had the thumbs, might be apex sort of species. And the fact is, whether we want to elevate ourselves to that level or not, like it or not, we are still just animals. We're very clever animals. We're tool-using, thumb-wielding animals, but we are still animals. And we very well may be using sentient creatures to experiment upon, to eat. Cows apparently show a lot of distress when their calves are taken away, which isn't surprising, because, I mean, it's just one of those things that it gives me a lot of thought, because it's one of those things that I watched, or I have watched in the past, a lot of violent Japanese films. And my professor was a vegan. And the one part of a film by the name of The Suicide Club that neither she or I could watch is a scene in which this sort of megalomaniac has taken a whole bunch of humans prisoner, as well as you can see what sounds like dogs and cats in these bags. And you see people murdering people, and you can kind of understand that, and you kind of deal with that, but there's one scene in which a character by the name of Genesis starts to stomp on a bag that makes whimpering noises that are obviously meant to be a dog, and I can't watch that. Both me and my professor had to step out of the room because I can't deal with that. Can't deal with the idea of animals being abused that way. Even though obviously it's just a Foley artist and nothing's actually there, it really disturbed me. So these are all things that have sort of percolated around the back of my head, and got me thinking on sort of the subject. So I'd like to sort of open up for people to give some thoughts on the fact that where do we stand if, like Douglas Adams has put out, dolphins are sentient and smarter than us, and we've been catching them in nets for how many years and killing them along with tuna because we just think that it looks yummy for lunch. So that's why I've abducted Ian to come in as he is now our panel vegan. Woohoo!
Hello.
Hello. There we go.
Mentioned. Well, the question is,
You may need to bring your slider down just because you're breaking up a little bit. It may just be that the bandwidth is a bit low.
If you look at the top of where your settings are.
Well, firstly, I'll take off my my camera. Does that help?
That helps a little bit. If you slide the bandwidth thing down, if you've got the option of high, medium, low, camera only, no, mic only even, and that's made you go silent.
I am actually I'm just trying to work it out.
There.
Okay.
Perfect.
Well, if you tell me no, because what I was actually going to do was just move the microphone away from my mouth so that I could actually just now. But sentience means feeling. No, science fiction confuses the term.
I'm still getting, before you go any further, I'm still getting quite a lot of breakup from you there, Ian.
Should we bring down our bandwidth?
Yeah, I'm going to drop mine down a little bit.
Am I peaking or am I picking up because of...
It's bandwidth issues, you're breaking up because of that. So what you need to do is, there's the little kind of ramp almost between the cog and the camera in your settings. If you just lower the settings down, then it'll prioritize audio above video.
Okay.
There we go.
Right. So I am just at very low, so that I can. Okay. Thank you very much for that.
That's perfect. Thank you, Ian.
But sentient.
Yeah.
The ability is not brutal amongst the consciousness certainly amongst the higher quadrata, the people, the animals with backbones. We have a backbone. The expert at a big conference in 2012 in the memory of Francis Watson, who was one of the discoverers of DNA. And I'd just like to read just a couple of sentences from that declaration. We declare the following. The absence of heavily folded layer on top of the mammalian brain that gives us the advanced thinking abilities as mammals, as humans. The absence to preclude an organism from experiencing affective states, feelings in English. Convergent evidence indicates that non-human animals have the neuroanatomical, neurochemical, and neurophysiological substrates of conscious states, along with the capacity to exhibit intentional behaviours. In other words, they're built the same way we are. They've obviously got the stuff that helps them feel and decide, and they obviously decide. the cow not only cries for her children when they're taken away from her, visibly and obviously, but she also is another mammal. You pull her brain apart, and she's got the same bits that care. Consequently, the weight of evidence indicates that humans are not unique in possessing the neurological substrates that generate consciousness. Non-human animals, including all mammals and birds, and many other creatures, including octopuses, also possess these neurological substrates. So those are just the animals that scientists are looking at saying, we are sure they are capable of joy and suffering and consciousness. So the answer is yes. And obviously that has ethical implications.
I mean, I suppose one of the things that I was sort of pondering, creepily enough, as we were walking around a graveyard today. We had a little walk around our cemetery because we at least have quiet neighbors. Was the fact that if sentience, the way sci-fi sort of thinks of it, higher brain function, the ability to reason and recognize oneself as an individual, the way that we think of ourselves as sentient exists in other animals.
So the word is sapiens. We're Homo sapiens. The ability to think.
Sapiens. Yeah. So sapiens then is that, are we in a position where we have as much responsibility for stewardship in dealing with other animals, but where does that then put the fact that if a sapient lion is eating a sapient antelope, does that violence get negated? Because I mean, that's what got me thinking about the whole, or from the Ken and Kel thing, is these are obviously sapient creatures that have families and technology. I mean, they're basically animal equivalents to an analog to human society, but they're obviously eating and killing each other. Where does that then leave us is one of the things that isn't particularly well formed in my head, but was sort of bubbling around.
I think the issue that it raises in my mind is that, do we accept a degree of responsibility and modify our behaviour as a result of the awareness of the situation, or do we just say, this is the situation, but we are still a predator species? And are we denying our nature as a predator species by...
Or at least as an omnivorous species based on, morphology.
Well, if we're going to adapt that, if we're going to say the law of the jungle is the basis of our morality, and we are omnivores. We, in some ways, it's lucky that we who have evolved sapiens, who have the ability to think about philosophy and all these things, happen to be a species who can be healthy on an omnivorous diet or on a herbivorous diet. That's perhaps lucky, but if we were going to say, okay, morality is based on we are this kind of species, that has a couple of consequences. Firstly, we kind of need to offer ourselves up and make sure that some of us are eaten by lions and alligators and sharks, because we are, after all, not actually the apex predator. And also, we have to accept various other behaviours that, if you look at humans in small hunting groups, that the kind of small hunting groups, hunter-gatherer structure we've inherited from our pre-human ancestors, then we also have to look at really horrible stuff. Murder and the utter abuse of anybody without the power to resist, that have been completely normal parts of life as a human being, terrible parts of life as a human being. But for most of humanity's existence, before we became, before civilization. I don't know if you know the book by Steven Pinker, The Better End of Sociologist, who tracked a decline in the amount of violence, sexual and physical violence, between humans and also from humans to other animals over the many thousands of years in history, and demonstrate that as every generation learns to be nicer to each other, we have a real decline in violence.
Yeah.
Which just means, so I think we have a choice. I mean, if we, morality has developed. Obviously, you've got the morality of Homer and the Bronze Age gods. That was basically loyalty to your king was the edge of your moral universe, and you've got and you've got morality based in ahimsa, based in the idea of the Shamanic movement in Iron Age India, which where I've actually just come back from interviewing a bunch of people, based on trying not to hurt others. And I think it's a pretty good. And if that's the basis of, if trying not to hurt others is the basis for your ethics, and obviously, then obviously, well, other animals suffer. How can I reduce that? I'm lucky that I don't need to eat them. I think the obvious is a fairly obvious piece of moral reasoning. I actually, and as for the, you talked about cute, fluffy animals in the comic. Also, I think it was.
Yeah.
Catherine showed us the comic. I kind of live with that dilemma. I'll see if I can grab hold of her in the shape of an American tortoise shell called Mazzy, who.
You want to eat your cat?
Wait, no. What? Don't say that.
It's a dilemma. Do I eat my cat each morning? No.
I'm wearing headphones. She can't hear you say that. Hear that you said that.
Yeah, we have 2 cats of our own. So.
While you were talking about, because I just want to briefly go back to something you were saying about how we should offer ourselves up to these. Mark, you found some information there.
Yeah, I just found it quickly on Google. In Tanzania, they estimate that 200 people a year are killed by lions in that one country alone.
The one that blew my mind was in Africa, some 2,900 people a year are killed by hippos.
Well, they get drunk, don't they?
Do they go drunk rampages?
And elephants get drunk as well, and they start charging towards you. But people are stupid; they don't respect these animals, so they'll just go charging in there on a safari. And
yeah. Well, I mean that's the thing is there's a lot of ethical questions to be asked, and I mean this is a personal stance that I have, and obviously I'm not espousing anything that I think anyone else should believe. This is just where I stand, which is having had my vegan professor and having long discussions about ethics and animal rights, factory farming and things like that are things that I absolutely find to be barbaric. They are. You look at the information, and yes, it's the things that they do to animals is not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. However, my personal stance on the whole omnivorous trend, besides the fact that human beings eat far too much meat, is that I think everyone should be exposed as much as possible at a reasonably young age, not like 4-year-olds, but in a reasonable age to the fact that the meat that you eat is often processed and treated in such a way through its very short life cycle that can be quite cruel. And once you are made aware of that fact, you obviously have the option to choose to eat meat or not. Sort of the whole informed consent thing is I think a lot of people see meat as being something that sits in a cellophane package, pre-cut up. People sort of imagine, like the weird animal from the restaurant at the end of the world
Yeah.
that is bred to and sentient or sapient and able to chop chunks of it off.
Yeah.
People don't seem to understand the connection between the cow and the idea of this happy farm, which isn't reality, and the steak on their plate.
Well, it reminds me as well of The Simpsons with. I just found the clip of The Simpsons. Troy McClure stars in Meat and You, where he takes, I think, little Billy or little Tommy or something to an abattoir, and they go into the abattoir, and you don't see what's in it. And little Tommy comes out the other end with him, and little Tommy's like, "Ah!" And Troy McClure's, "Now you've seen how meat is made." It's.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this massive disconnect between the food that we eat and how it's produced, and I think that's true of all types of food. I think we just assume that the image of a farm that we have in our storybooks is actually the farm life that exists, when in fact factory farming and battery cages, things like that, are all very cruel and very messed up.
Yeah.
I think really if you are able to witness what happens to the food you eat and are able to then choose to eat meat, fine. You know the moral implications of it. That is your choice at that point. There is a certain amount to be said for the fact that biologically eating meat got us to where we are. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that you know that our ancestors ate meat to the point that we were able to make the decision to choose not to have to survive on animal products if we choose not to.
Yeah.
But I honestly think that people should be like, this is what happens. Chicks can be, have their beaks cut off and their feet cut off so that they're not, pecking and scratching each other and shoved into a cage, and this is what you're going to have for tea tonight.
It's
and left to choose.
There used to be a TV program called How It's Made. It's on Channel 5 or something like that, Discovery Channel. And they normally show you how a fire engine's made or something like that. Yeah, and we were sitting down here watching it one night, and they had chickens going around on conveyor belts. And if they were too small, they fell through the grid. I don't know where they went afterwards. They didn't show that because it was obviously fluffy little chicks, and they didn't want to upset people too much.
Pretty sure they get ground up for animal food.
That's really great.
Just saying.
I just watched
that's what happens to it.
And I went off chicken for like 3 months. I couldn't eat it because it just put me off so much.
So what was it making when it was like? Because the show was How It's Made. I mean, I'm assuming it wasn't how chickens are made.
You just saw on these conveyor belts, the great big long things. All the males were taken out. It's just the females they wanted. And it was just seeing these little fluffy things that you normally see on TV running around a farmyard, all quite happily, being treated like that. It made me physically almost sick to see it. And I know the horror stories that animals go through. I know the pigs go through hell from my bacon and sausages. And I do feel terribly guilty eating it.
But you still do it, yeah.
I still do it, yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, too.
I think it's...
Yep, go ahead, Ian.
Yes, I know. It's just interesting to hear this. Well, if I mean, a bunch of things to say, but I should mention that in my radio show, The Vegan Option, I did interview a bunch of grown-ups who'd been brought up vegan about their vegan childhoods and what they were told, and we can talk more about that if you like. But they didn't seem to find it particularly traumatic that when their classmates didn't know where food came from, they did. But on the question of feeling that if somebody's aware of the consequences, the harm they're doing, and are comfortable with it, that makes it okay. I'm wondering what other fields of ethical questions where we go, well, if people can see and are comfortable and are aware of the unpleasant things that are happening to others as a consequence of their actions, then that's okay. We don't. That's not part of the justice system. That's not when we actually are. When more of us are sure that something is wrong, we don't say, well, it's okay. I feel okay about being murdered as long as the person who was murdering me was kind of in touch with the consequences of their actions.
But
I think harm is still harm.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily disagree, but I think that the ignorant side is something that I'm very anti-ignorance on all fronts, which is why I've come to the point of being, for a long time I was agnostic, now I'm an atheist. I'm fine with the religious who think. It's the people who are willfully ignorant that bother me. Same thing for meat eaters and all sorts of other things. I think people should be informed. And I think a lot less people would eat meat should they be aware. However,
Which is, of course, sorry.
I'm not going to deny the fact that I am an omnivore, and I try and make reasonable choices in the meat that I eat. But I am not at a point in my life where I'm committing to vegetarianism or veganism, and I'm pretty sure everyone else here besides you, Ian, not to single you out, either eats meat or has eaten meat for a large swathe of their lives.
I was omnivorous for a large swathe of my life.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing, is it's that I specifically wanted someone who had a different viewpoint on, which is why I via Patrina, sort of invited you in.
Thank you.
And just so you're aware, because obviously you're not familiar with us nor our show, we are horrible devil's advocates. So we're not trying to be sort of obnoxious if we go, but
no, that's fine.
We do that to each other constantly. Regardless, we will find the opposite side to be on.
I can almost sense of that building up in my co-host Maxie there. He's got the look about him.
Well, he always looks like a bit of a shit, to be honest.
Yes. One of the things that I wanted to bring up was the use of animals in science, because I think that's a very difficult ethical issue. In that there is a need to use animal models, and we don't have an alternative. And in fact, when it comes to new drugs, it's a legal requirement that animal testing is carried out. So that even if there was an alternative, you still legally have to go through the animal testing stage. And that's a difficult one, because I'm quite like Kat in that, having looked at where meat comes from and all that, I'm still omnivorous. But I do think about where it's come from every time I eat meat. But also as a scientist, I've had to face the fact that animals have had to be used.
Mm-hmm.
And without an alternative. And while I'm aware of all the controls and the checks that are put in place, the justifications that have to be put forward before an animal is used, it's still something that while I acknowledge the requirement for it, it still sits very uncomfortably with me. I wouldn't come out against it because there isn't an alternative, but it doesn't mean I like it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is it riles up a whole bunch of feelings in me, because I absolutely can see both sides of the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And can understand both the feeling of awful necessity for certain things to happen, and the complete sort of waste of life it seems to be to see a lot of animals go through what happens, you know. And I don't know. I mean, I just really struggle with it, which is kind of why I wanted to talk about it, because it is a bit of cognitive dissonance for myself.
Yeah.
It's the fact that it's also, for instance, the moral discussion about, for instance, why in Western society are cats and dogs pets, and in some Eastern societies they're absolutely food. Guinea pigs are commonly eaten in South America. But we, wouldn't be, popping Tommy Cavey into a pot because we see those as companion animals.
Well, it's like when the horse meat scandal kicked off in the UK.
Exactly, and
Everyone was
Fiona and her
thinking,
horses.
how can you eat horses? They're wonderful animals. Well, no, they're just animals, just like cows are. We eat them fine, but all of a sudden, because it's a horse that you see running in the Grand National, there's a big kick-off about it.
Yeah.
My only objection to that was the fact that it was done in
the Grand
ignorance.
National.
Well, it's just the point I got. It's just the first thing I thought.
Yeah, it was the fact that nobody knew it was horse meat. I think that was the really big problem with it. There were a lot of people who did say, "Oh no, you can't eat a horse." I have horses. I don't see the problem in that. I wouldn't choose to eat horse because I keep horses. And the thought that it might be foisted on me without me knowing it.
I think that's the problem, isn't it?
That's the big problem.
Do make the connection with dogs and with horses. They begin to
Ian, you might have to turn
the
your
other
fan
animal.
down again, just because we lost you there. You made a beautiful musical
Very
sound.
musical little breakup there.
Sounded like a xylophone.
It was beautiful. It was absolutely
Great arpeggio.
I'm taking my old video off.
Yeah, it may just be easier to leave it off.
Almost. That's okay. Isabella disappears.
I was going to mention the Grand National kills a few people every. A few horses. The Grand National is every year, but so just on that aside. But I think it is that we make a connection with our dogs and our cats, and we see their
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas, and it's when we take account of all animals sentient that we look into. Well, how can we reflect our values positively in our lives? But I think we've just got used to making that connection. Similarly, I mean, conversely, in India, of course, they'll eat horses but not cows. And you see, and I get.
They're breaking up again badly.
An awful lot of breakup there. Sorry. I'm aware that Chris is kind of almost bursting at the seams to say something here.
Come, Chris, say.
Step into the light by the fire and tell us tales.
Here's the one thing that I'd like to open with, and I hate to be the turd in the punch bowl because everything seems so very ethical and moral in the way that this subject has been approached, but I mean, without a sense of humor about it, I don't think it's worth talking about. So I'm going to be the first to say that the more an animal suffers, the more delicious it is. Veal is fantastic. I can't eat it. I even eat baby carrots. I don't care. And the younger it is, the more delicious it is. No, and because it's tender. Now,
if he could punch you through a computer, he probably would.
Yeah. So I'm only kidding partially. I genuinely don't have a problem with animal research, knowing where my food comes from. I watch those movies. I've watched those movies. It's not so much that they don't shock me, it's that I'm a humanist and not an animalist, right? I understand that as animals, we humans, from my perception, I'm going to call it a human exceptionalism, is something that we kind of need to address because that's what that's the cognitive process by which people consider humans to be different from animals, and those are the arguments that you started laying out at the beginning there, Ian. Now, it's not that it's not a problem for me. It's a problem for me at the fringes, such that, of course, it's not so much that I'm certainly not an animal rights supporter. They would, I'm more of an animal welfare supporter in the sense that I'm reading something right here that it has a cute little explanation to differentiate them. Animal rights people are campaigning for no cages, while animal welfare people are campaigning for bigger cages. I want there to be as humane a process as possible when the animals are killed so that I can eat them, but I want the animals killed so I can eat them. Mm-hmm. And as far as the research goes, yeah, it is an irreplaceable model right now.
And the regulations on laboratory animals, they are some of the most protected animals. Laboratory animals are some of the most protected animals in the world.
They're protected more than the employees are.
Is that not true?
Indeed. What was that, Ian?
That's simply not true. I know that there are a couple of elements in which, for example, methods of slaughter that are used in the food industry aren't permitted in animal experiments, but the proportion of, I mean, in some ways, I don't. It's a less it's a less straightforward issue, but the number of inspectors is very low. I should say, for background, myself, I've got a PhD in biochemistry, so I know I come from an academic background, from a life sciences background.
And just so you know, I'm a manager of a laboratory that studies psychology at a center that attacks a specific topic from many different angles, one of which is an animal model. So I'm also familiar because one of my best friends is a laboratory manager, and he handles one of the animals, the cohort of animals.
And I've had to work with animals in my work as well.
So the regulations that are required to handle and test animals are super strict. Like you have to jump through so much red tape to even acquire an animal, and then the regulations. They are the most protected animals, at least in America.
I filled in forms for 6 months, justifying why I needed a rabbit to produce polyclonal antibodies. This was a rabbit that was then going to a happy life. It wasn't being sacrificed at any point, but 6 months of form filling and justification as to why I needed this rabbit.
And did the rabbit thank you at any point? I bet it didn't.
No, it bit me.
It bit you?
Yeah.
To be fair, Fee, I'd bite you too.
Yeah, but we know what you're like.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's a valid point as well, though, that certainly with one of the things that's a bane of my life is trains, and there's no maximum limit for the amount of humans you can cram into a carriage, but there are guidelines and limits for cattle. So, we could all be there, kind of being squashed to death.
But to be fair, though, just to again, devil's advocate.
Yeah.
You can choose to get the fuck off that train. That cow can't go. Excuse me, sir. Mind pulling over? Bit cramped here. Somebody's on my udder. You mind fucking off?
Yeah, but you know what? The cow isn't going to get sacked from its job if it's late for work.
So I want to address that, but I think that I have a feeling that Ian was talking.
Yes, I want to come in on a couple of things. Obviously,
I know, but I want to clarify something real quick, Ian, because it sounded like you were addressing agricultural animals when you were answering, and my point when you were arguing against what I was saying, which was that research animals are some of the most protected animals. Because you didn't address research animals, you started talking immediately about agricultural animals, or animals that are brought up for food.
Yes,
so I just want to make sure we're cool.
Yes, I know that, and of course we're looking at two different regulatory regimes. I'm assuming that you're in America, and I know that the regulatory regime in the UK, and I have no doubt that it is terribly bureaucratic, as all these things are, is stricter than the regime in America. I'm not massively across the animal experiments issue, but certainly I'm pretty confident there is more protection for companion animals than there is for experimental ones. Surely, certainly there, if you fill in enough forms, you can, and get the approval from the right committee, you can do an experiment that causes severe suffering to an animal. And you can't ever do that with a pet without breaking the rules.
But I think a lot of people do that to their pets.
I think unfortunately, I think the side of it that maybe Chris is digging at is that there are measures and kind of guidelines in place to try and prevent unnecessary suffering for the animals in the research world, whereas though those rules maybe what I'm trying to say is that those rules are maybe more enforced in the research world than they would be in just Jim down the street who owns a pet.
And I also think that it's completely different because the research that you're talking about, in which an animal is purposely made to suffer, is such a niche area of the kind of research that animals are used for. To use that as a case in point of what kind of research happens with animals, I think is deceptive.
It's a case in point of the level of protection they have.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say it was a representative experiment.
Okay, but you're right. We can use animals for models of answering questions that have to do with stress, that have to do with suffering in one way, shape, or form. And once again, I will throw my hat in the ring of I would rather it be done on animals than humans. Of course, we have the Belmont Report here in America. I don't know whether it's international, but we have institutional review boards for human participants that are meant to protect them. So yeah, once again, I just think that animal research is important. On the fringes, yeah, I think about it, and I have a little dissonance about the ethics, but in general, not so much.
Yeah.
Thing is, Chris, would you feel any different about eating certain animals or certain amount of experiment if the chimp that's going through a stress test because it's the nearest human analog prior to human testing turned around, looked at you, and started talking to you? If you had a language sort of connection, if it became sort of obvious that they were sort of sapient, would you feel suddenly differently, or would you still think, I'm a human, it's me and my species, this is where we stand? Or is it the fact
it depends. I mean, I can tell you that as much as I love my roommates, I have 2 roommates, and there is 1 dog and 1 cat. I love the dog and cat. I think they're lovely. I pet them both up and give them love all the time. If both of my roommates were killed and the world was going to end and there was no food, I would eat the shit out of those pets. No problem.
I think if it comes down to it, that's it. But this is the one thing I wanted to...
But if it came down to it, we'd eat the shit out of each other.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yes.
I think if we'd run out of other things to eat...
I'd eat you first.
Would you?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was using that as a case in point to talk about emotional relationships as they apply to non-human animals.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for me, the problem with that is, let's see. What the frig was I going to say? Oh, emotional I have it written here. Where the hell is it? Oh, okay. Connection with pets. Connection with pets is merely a neurochemical reaction that is triggered by our own anthropomorphizing because they have faces. Any connection we make with any animal, human or non-human, once that connection is broken, is going to cause something in us because we have oxytocin running through us when we bond with things, and that's pretty much what it comes down to. I feel that I could happily reframe that with any animals that I am friendly with, whether I was testing them or they're domestic animals. If I needed to eat them, I would start sautéing up the garlic and onions.
There's another way to look at this as well, and this is something that Kat and I were also talking about when we were walking around the graveyard today, looking at it from completely the opposite point of view. How would we react if tomorrow some beings far more powerful than us rocked on up and said, "Right, you're our food"? How would we as a species react?
It'd be miserable.
Is there any? I don't suppose you want to play the skit.
It's such a nightmare to play audio into the shows.
Well, let's in this case, just because, to be honest, our technology fails us. Would you mind posting that into the comments?
Once the show's over, I should be able to post it into the comments. Yes, it's because it won't, for some reason, when we're running these hangouts, it won't let you actually post links into the comments during it. But as soon as it's over,
Oh, that's interesting.
very annoying. Google tried to make these things as difficult as possible.
But we'll make sure that gets put up. 'Cause
Yes.
when you said that it was a Doctor Who sketch, because I'm a massive Whovian,
Yeah.
I did kind of want to go see it.
I think that will. So yeah, if you send us the link to that, that'd be great.
It's off to the side. He gave it to you.
Oh right. Oh yes, you did, didn't you? Yes. But
No,
I mean, it's
SoundCloud. Sorry, you didn't.
yeah. Oh no. Yeah. If you could send us a link to that, that'd be fantastic, Ian. But yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing. I mean, how would we immediately take up arms and resist, or would we go, oh well, that's how it is. That's what we've been doing. So.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing that gets you think about things like the Morlocks and the Eloys, the fact that they're now sort of farming humans.
Yeah.
And I mean it's as cushy as any animal could possibly get a lifestyle for before, the garlic and onions went in the pan.
Yeah.
But we find things like the time machine, the idea of the Morlocks and the Eloys horrifying.
Yeah.
Because it's going, these beautiful Aryan children frolicking about to be eaten. How terrible.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is that, yes, I eat meat. I will continue to eat meat. But it's one of those things to think about, if a dolphin came up to me and started talking, I think it's the language side, and it's the vocal language side that then snaps the button for me going, well, I'm dealing with something that's obviously sapient.
Yeah.
And the fact is, I'm sure that there are plenty of species that either are or border on sapience in the universe, as well as our planet. I'm pretty sure dolphins are pretty fucking close. If they had thumbs and, feet, we probably would have, a chew on our hands for apex life form,
Well, we only need to go back a few tens of thousands of years to be in a world that's not too far from Lord of the Rings, where we're not the only species of human. We have we have 3 or 4 other species of human, like Neanderthal, with presumably slightly different mental and physical abilities.
Yeah, and
sharing the world with us and reminding us we're not that we are more of a continuum with the rest of the animal kingdom, and it's not and that we're actually not quite so exceptional.
But the whole thing for me, coming from a human evolution and anthropological background, is the fact is that it's often bandied about and often accepted the fact that there was probably, during any sort of crossover where the 2 species interacted, it was likely a war environment. I don't know that it was more make war than make love. I mean, obviously there's some suggestion that Neanderthals genes do live on quite strongly through certain populations, showing that we were close enough that we could interbreed, and then that gets poo-pooed and someone goes, no, and then we go, yes. But, I mean, the fact is, if another...
Apparently redheads are more Neanderthal, by the way.
Yeah, I knew I was, ancient. My ex-husband used to say that I could wiggle my ears because it was back from when I used to be a little desert creature that popped my ears up and look around before I got eaten, which used to always make me laugh. And they call me a wee beastie, which is very Scottish of him. But yeah, but no, I mean, it's just the idea of if we had another hominid spring up that's like us, that we can see as being a similar human species. Would they try and wipe us out? Would we try and wipe them out? Would it be harmony? It's the idea of, a universe that has 2 planets that can support habitable life. Is it always going to be a case that we're going to try and dominate and kill off the nearest thing, or can we all just get along?
It could be that we could have been in an unusual situation of being kind of the sort of solitary species at this level. There may be other places in the universe where that isn't the case, or it might be that isn't the case, and that's the kind of standard model elsewhere, and that maybe we've got this very sort of selfish, we will do what we want and be dickheads about it thing going on.
I've always thought that we can't even live on this planet together in quiet. People in the same country can't even live together, 2 different groups. So my hopes of 2 different planets trying to coexist.
Or sapient species.
Yeah, my faith in human nature is just not that strong to hope that will happen.
As you can see, we have been joined by Mr. Cliff Jumper, which means that we are drawing to the point where we're about an hour and a half into the show. So we're going to start to draw this part of the show to a close. And we always bring in Cliff at this point because Cliff is the host of the post show where the discussion continues. Far
for as long as we want.
Yeah, for as long and in a more kind of relaxed.
It's where the chimps can throw their feces.
Yeah, people can start getting kind of annoyed with each other at that point, and we try to keep it civil at this side, and actually Cliff tries to keep it civil at that side. I call him Cliff, even though his name's not Cliff.
It's Cliff as far as we're concerned.
Mr. Jumper.
What we gotta do is every time he comes in, instead of shouting Norm, go Cliff!
Start singing Summer Holiday.
I couldn't through my mind.
So what's your thoughts on this, Monsieur Jumper?
Hello there. How's it going this evening?
It's great. Okay, can I quickly apologise to you though, first, Mr. Jumper? I haven't had a chance to put you into the titles yet.
To be honest, since I only gave them to you a few hours ago, I don't have a problem with that.
I'm usually quite quick, and this time it was just purely because I was making another video and I was photoshopping myself into looking like a woman with boobs.
What? The most disturbing image.
Yeah, it's on Facebook.
Yeah.
I've seen worse though, and I'm not.
Oh no, you have. I've sent you worse stuff. Because
Yes, you have. Thank you for that, Cat.
Yeah.
Oh no, was that? Oh yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, don't panic, don't go there. No.
So
yes, I want Cliff's opinion.
Clifford J, tell us what you're thinking.
Well, I've been listening along with it, and I want to point out I like eating meat. I was brought up on meat, and I like the taste of meat. However, if we were to create synthetic meat, and it looked and tasted like real meat, I'd jump ship, no problem. You know.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is,
people are working on it's a pretty good simulacra now. Obviously, it's ages, so I can't tell the difference that well. But anyway, sorry.
But one of the things that I always thought was funny was the idea that in my anthropology group, we went around and asked everyone, if you had the opportunity to cruelty-free and without recourse eat human being, try human being, would you do it?
I prefer not to, you know. There are some people that are completely unappetizing. Yeah, I think Ran Campbell. I don't know if I'd want to eat him. You know.
But that's the thing is, it's would you try it? And most of the anthropology class said yes. If we had an absolutely cruelty-free, ethically being able to source, if last wish, strike up the Barbie sort of thing. Would you try human? And I absolutely would.
I would love to know if the humans really do taste like chicken.
Nah.
That's the thing is pork. Apparently we're a lot like pork.
Yeah.
Cannibals used to call the white Europeans lumpigs.
Yeah.
Well, I understand
placenta you want. So if you want actual to get hold of human flesh in an ethical way, the best source is probably placenta.
But it's not the same. I don't eat offal from animals. I'm not going to eat them from us. But I mean that's the thing.
Maybe placenta sausage.
Yeah. That's the thing though is that this is something that may come into the next show that we're doing. But there's been a recent kerfluffle about extended breastfeeding online.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing that milk squicks me out. When you really think about it, cow's milk, goat's milk, all of that squicks me out. It's weird.
Mm-hmm.
We are drinking something that is meant to make a baby cow how many hundreds of pounds within how many months. It's fucking weird that we drink another animal's milk. Give me cheese, give me yogurt, give me ice cream, but I find actual milk really weird.
I always wonder about the origins of who was the first guy or person.
I've wondered about that one myself, and isn't it a good job it wasn't a bull they found?
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's the whole thing is that there's a lot of stuff like that where the people who were making this big deal out of a 5-year-old nursing are people who will happily go and put milk on their cereal in the morning, but are really disgusted by the idea of human breast milk, which is the only milk that we're actually ever meant to consume.
Well, we worry about things.
Weird.
we worry about things things like this because we've been thinking about it a lot. But if you consider that many thousands of years, who knows how long? I don't know how long we've been breeding cows for milk, but people watch the cow. They look at mothers feeding their young, humans feeding our young's breast milk. Okay, and then they see cows doing the same thing and being able to produce it for not just one, not for one calf, but quite a few and lots of it. So it's like, well, maybe we can get it from there. It's probably simple as that.
No, well,
This is
one thing I know. Yeah, you're right. It is involved. Sorry?
I said Ian actually knows.
I mean, cows were domesticated for flesh and actually for blood several thousand years ago, but milk only came a few thousand years ago. And yes, as you were just saying, the enzyme to digest it, lactase, is only present in a minority of the population. Most people don't have it. I don't know how it began. I think you're. I think Jumper's absolutely right in the speculation, but it's not true that they saw the cow and thought, "My goodness, they're producing so much," because the amount that a modern cow, yes, it's massively.
Yeah.
We're looking at her mother had taken and turned into a milk production machine. So she'll her natural lifespan is about 20 years, and she'll be kept pregnant as soon as she's biologically able to, and pregnant again while she's still lactating, and the calf taken away sooner if it's a boy, and as soon as her daughter can replace her, she's killed. So obviously they're worn out very quickly.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've seen photographs of cows with horribly distended udders because their milk production is being absolutely maximised.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the same way that with chickens you get horribly sort of overgrown chickens that look just monstrous and weird because we're biologically manipulating another creature to produce more of what we think the good bits are to eat, I mean, we've been manipulating animals for thousands of years, which, I mean, when you look at animals, it's kind of hard to deny that evolution happens because we guide it constantly in order to make a different version of an animal that we think looks better because it's got, a face mask and paws that change color because it's colder areas, or, a pug with a squished face, But no, I mean, for me personally, milk is my sort of bugbear of the animal kingdom, because meat eating I understand, but you don't ever see a lion attack a gazelle and then, nip up on the nipples for a little bit. It's just weird when you really think about it. It's really bizarre.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Oh, God.
The lion lay down with the lamb and had a milkshake.
The thing
on the
is,
Nature Channel, right after it takes him down, just like cuddles a little bit and. Okay, oh, sorry.
As soon as humans had developed lactose tolerance, because it's lactose intolerance is how we began.
That's our default
we
state,
become lactose intolerant. I think it was about 2.5 years old, or thereabouts. That is what would stop breastfeeding.
It starts
but
to cause
as soon as lactose tolerance became common in the population, then you have a cow. You can only eat your cow once.
But you can drink its milk.
But you can drink its milk for years. And so possibly that is how we've ended up in accepting drinking animals' milk. You keep your animal alive longer, you get more from it.
Isn't this the same as chickens, I suppose?
Yeah, with eggs and things like that.
Yeah, but also one of the problems with chickens is that the younger the chicken, then the better the meat is.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously the chicken would be smaller. So what they've started to do is they're breeding chickens that grow very, very fast, that put on a lot of muscle. And unfortunately, they haven't selected for improved joints. So these poor animals are on very young chicken joints, but they're carrying the weight of an adult chicken. And many of the chickens have dreadful arthritis because of this. And you don't see it as often today, but you used to occasionally, when you bought your chicken, if you looked at it carefully, and sadly as a teenager I would actually dissect the cooked Sunday chicken to look at the joints, and you would find joint abnormalities in these poor animals.
Well, that's one of the things that I find a bit disturbing in Britain, again, because I'm used to my nice pink packaging when it comes to my meat, is I was quite freaked out when I first lived here and found that oftentimes the sort of scale part of the legs are still on chickens and turkeys in this country, whereas they're not in the US. They're absolutely severed away. It's all clean. Everything's lovely. You don't see anything like that. But you absolutely... It's hard not to look at chicken legs and go, I'm eating a fucking dinosaur. Small, angry dinosaur.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I mean, same thing for ostriches. I did what we call the paleo picnic every year in the anthropology department, where we got deer, moose, things like that had been slaughtered. And the year that I did, we had an ostrich. And you look at this carcass, and you go, absolutely, I can see that if this wasn't feathers, if this was scales, I'm dealing with the fast-running predator bird. That take it far enough back, and suddenly I've got myself a dinosaur. Their face is everything. It's just bizarre, but that's neither here nor there. But
you actually don't need to go that far back. It's only about I think it's like 20,000 years ago. Southern America, the apex predator was a large flightless bird.
I'm not surprised. Emus are mean.
Yeah.
Thing about ostriches, they're dumb animals anyway, aren't they? You know, there you've got something, oh dear, there's a predator. Well, I'm one of the fastest animals on the world. I could easily outrun it. But no, I'll stick my head in the ground.
Nope, that doesn't actually happen.
I know.
It's apocryphal.
It's the opportunity for a joke.
Yeah, the size of an ostrich.
Hey, that's a three-legged cloud. Never seen one of those before.
Yeah, when you're the size of an ostrich, with the weaponry of an ostrich, you don't need to fly.
Yeah, that's the thing that shocked me, is looking at the ostriches' sort of musculature and step, was looking at these. For safety purposes in the slaughtering process, they had to remove the head and the feet. You couldn't have them on the carcass brought to you as human consumable, but they gave us the head and the feet. And the feet are insane. Like, you look at them and they've got sort of this pointed foot and these nails, and they're just absolutely mad looking at these things. But I mean, that's the thing, is I think we underestimate the dangerousness of a lot of species. Like, it again, I wish Pete was here because he could probably correct me, but kangaroos are straight up, hitmen of that. They'll disembowel dingoes, they'll hold them under the water, they'll drown them, straight up freaking drown them, So I mean, there's some crazy shit in the animal kingdom, but but that's the thing, is it's, again, I guess it just brings us back to the whole law of the jungle ethics thing that becomes sort of problematic, because you get torn between going, well, if we had a sapient antelope, it would still be chased down in terror and pain by a sapient lion, So what's appropriate? And I mean, I think human stewardship, we have to do the best we can to ensure minimal suffering to all species.
Yeah.
And certainly
Sorry,
not to act
I'm confused.
cruelly.
When you say, are you imagining a universe where both the antelope and the lion are able to think and talk?
Well,
like the
but
cartoon, or do you just mean the lion and the antelope can feel in this universe?
Well, that's why I said sapient rather than sentient, because
Right.
you refer
Yeah.
the idea of
Gotcha. It's
something
like
acting
the
us.
comic.
A little bit, yeah. Just the idea that knowing that antelope is, because I don't know if on a strictly thought-based level, obviously the antelope understands that it's in mortal terror for its life, but the lion doesn't go, well, that one was scared to fuck, you know? It's not a consideration, but what would happen, I don't know that anything would we end up in a world where nothing attempted to eat meat, just because it had sort of moral grounding.
Well,
and that's
humans
the thing, it's just, we're not, entirely, if we're not unique in that sort of stewardship side of what happens,
Isn't that what makes us different, though? We have a conscience about what we're doing, whereas do animals really care about, whether they're going to eat something?
Actually, there's a fair amount of...
That's an interesting question, actually.
I'm pretty sure that there's evidence that some other mammals, maybe not apex, maybe not the big cats, have a conscience, but that actually do behave in ways that demonstrate a conscience. But I'd have to stop and look it up. I'm pretty sure that's really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the ones that I've seen is, I believe it's a leopard, kills an adult female baboon, and then proceeds to suckle and care for, at least briefly, its baby baboon.
Yeah.
And it's sort of an odd cross-species interaction there. But, I mean, I'm sure that there's a certain amount of intelligence above the level that we credit animals for.
Yeah.
An awful lot. My cat's smart as fuck. It's smarter than most of the people I talk to at work. So... And she can communicate. She communicates via sign language. She, instead of me going, Sky, I'm going to teach you how to do this motion, and this will tell me this. She goes, well, you're obviously dumb as shit. I'm going to walk over here, look at you. I'm going to stand up, and I'm going to tap this door 3 times. And if I tap this door 3 times, this means, you stupid bastard, get off your butt and come let me out. And it's not, she doesn't meow, she doesn't pace, and she doesn't do it multiple times, but she goes, I have to vocalize because you're stupid. And I can't, use the tiny twitches and such. So I'm going to spell this out for you. And she absolutely has come up with her own signs for certain actions. Yeah. She's trained me to let her out, Oh,
my cat will come up and tap me in the shoulder.
My ex-husband...
And if it's really annoyed, it taps me on the shoulder with its claws out.
Oh.
But the funny thing is,
this whole thing... Well, cats' behaviors and the things that they do in order to get rewards is really superstitious behavior. Really, looking any deeper into it is anthropomorphizing the animal. It's very well known in the literature on behaviorist psychology that those kinds of superstitious behaviors that you can get a cat to do a whole line of different things before you reward them. That doesn't mean that each step of those long lines of things is telling you something different, like, hey, you're not paying attention to this, so I'll do this, or you're not paying attention to this, so I'll do this. They're just like, this is the routine that I have to do to get the reward because I'm behavioralistically trained. Now, my problem with the whole, trying to equivocate the consciousness of non-human animals with the consciousness of human animals kind of comes down to this. Earlier Ian was mentioning that potentially, non-human animals are as smart as human animals. Talking about the neuroanatomy and physiology.
I didn't say they were as smart as humans. Obviously.
Okay.
Obviously,
my apologies.
Humans are. And it wasn't. I was quoting the Cambridge Declaration, which it's not an animal rights document. It is a statement by. It is a statement from a scientific conference about consciousness, and it's basically saying that that they, boiling it down, we know they can feel and make decisions because they've got the stuff there in their brains, and we know from their behaviour that they make decisions, and they but that's not saying that they can do everything a human can do. And you break that down, and there's a whole literature which I'm not completely across, and saying, well, crows have tool use, but other species don't. That certainly a dog will pack and have quite tight, really see a human as part of his or her family and have a sense of where they are in the pack hierarchy, whereas I'm pretty sure my cat, well, from hearing from cat psychologists, my cat sees me as a large, non-hostile, clumsy cat, but I don't think she sees me in a more complicated way than that. So yeah, there's a variety of mental capacities different animals have, and we're one of those animals with a very with this really interesting ability of abstract thought.
Mm-hmm.
The other
I appreciate you clarifying that for me, because what I was going to say is based on the and I misattributed it to you, but based on what you read, what you brought to the table, you were if the rest of my notes aren't as bad as the first thing that I threw out, you were saying that they were saying that the neuroanatomical and physiological structure is there for them to decide and to feel and to have consciousness, whatever that means to whatever species we're talking about. But you kind of hit the nail on the head about what I was going to say. Like, for me, the difference is kind of a lion, while they do have the apparatus to decide and have consciousness, we already brought up the idea that lions can't really choose or decide to stop being a predator and do what is necessary to move forward with a protocol to get its nutrients from vegetable matter. Right? That is a choice that we can make. Like you are a vegan. You've made that choice, and you have troubleshot what it takes to get those nutrients and vitamins to survive without having to eat meat. So that was the point that I was making. But you made it much more eloquently than I did.
Thank you. And I just added a link. I added a link to the full Cambridge Declaration in the Sideways chat.
Oh, thanks so much.
Yeah, I wanted to mention about horses. It got me thinking. I know that people have taught some chimpanzees to use sign language so that they communicate with humans on the humans' terms. Working with horses, what I've had to do is to learn how they communicate with each other and to then communicate with them in their way, because they can't really be taught how to communicate in our way. And I'm wondering if that's one of the demarcations that we subconsciously notice when it comes to the way we treat animals. The horses are funny buggers at the best of times, but they're very subtle in their body language, and you have to actually adopt their body language. It's completely non-verbal, and you can get your horse to do exactly what you want it to do.
Yeah, Alex interacts with our cat sometimes using cat language. Like a cat smile is something that's really funny. It's sort of a slow blink, and Sky will smile at Alex. Alex will look back and go.
I'll do a little cat smile back at her.
Yeah.
And it's just funny, sort of reading through sort of animal signaling, because I mean, cats vocalize a lot more around human beings than they necessarily do around each other, because we don't vocalize. We vocalize, so they go, okay, we vocalize. So they vocalize as well, even if we're big, dumb, slow-moving
They realise
cats.
the other techniques aren't working, so they.
It's claws and meows.
Yes.
Yeah. Turtles the whole way down.
I mean, the interesting thing about the horse is that if I'm working with a horse on the ground, on a lunge line, if I look at its back end, it will walk. If I look at its shoulder, without me saying a word, just my eyes moving forward to its shoulder, it'll break into a trot. And if I look it straight in the eye, it'll canter.
How do you get to gallop?
And if I take my eyes back along its body, it'll slow down again. And it's just because, being a prey animal, horses know that predators will look them straight in the eye. You approach a horse looking at its shoulder, not its eyes. If you look at its eyes, it'll back off. And it's by adopting their own language, I think that's how you get closer to the animal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, in a way, I've now got a two-way communication with mine, and I wouldn't want to eat them.
The horse whisperer.
But I've tried this with cows. And do you know the funny thing? It works the same.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that there's certain similarities in prey behavior, prey species behavior.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. But the thing you have to remember, though, that both cows and horses are exceptionally dangerous.
Yeah.
They can kill you with one blow. They can defend themselves, not against a lion, but against...
But we're soft and pink and squishy.
Yeah, and rampaging dogs and things like that. So they have the bulk and they have the weapons to defend themselves. Horses usually choose not to. Cows are more inclined to have a go at you. I think that's because rather than being domesticated, cows are almost like feral.
Feral cows.
Yeah.
Makes me think a bit of... Have you ever seen the film Black Sheep, which is about weird zombie sheep?
Mm-hmm.
Makes me think about
my
that.
word.
But before we get into that sort of thing, I want to let poor Cliff get in, especially since we're supposed to be running away to his house.
Cliff wanted to say something before we draw the show to a close. Cliff,
Yeah,
you wanted to drop in something.
There's a couple of notes that I've took while I was watching. When it comes to the synthetic meat thing, there's a sort of an after question that comes along with it, which if cows and pigs weren't needed for meat production, would they end up like pandas and lions and gorillas and the other endangered species?
I think domesticated cows would cease to exist. Because there's really not an analog anymore to a domesticated cow in the wild. I mean, obviously pigs still have boars, and pigs that escape into forest will go feral. I've never heard of a feral cow.
The opposite question, though, comes in as well. I remember someone making the joke that pandas should be put on the menu because since they seem to be unable to breed themselves, they're really picky, they have a limited diet. If we put them on the menu, we'll have so much more incentive to make sure that they keep breeding.
But to be fair, predator... Well, I mean, they're not even predators, they're just weird bamboo eating.
They're the bears that decided to go vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
And
just shows us hope for anybody.
It's worked out for them, though, hasn't it?
Actually, I thought pandas were originally from the cat lineage, because didn't they just show that they don't have sweet receptors because of that common ancestry?
I have no idea.
Nerd.
Oh.
And then the other one that
nerd.
The other one that I found in there was when Chris kind of made the joke about something along the lines of the more torture the animal, the tastier it is. The funny thing is that in some parts of the world, that's what people think. They, places like Korea and cats and things like that, and dogs, they put them in baskets, they terrorize them because they have this kind of idea that if you terrorize an animal to the brink of death, then you're putting the energy in the meat. It tastes better. It's a spiritual kind of an idea.
Yeah, that's horrible, though.
Well, I mean, there is lots of things like that in which people speculate, or it is speculated that certain sort of chemicals, when flooding the system, change the taste of the meat. And oftentimes it's the other way around, where you go, let's keep this as calm as possible, because actually the sort of flavor of terror spoils the taste, at least by our palates. Which actually briefly brings me on to something that I would like to have us take into Cliff's part of the show, which is the thought and debate about the idea of halal slaughter and the non-stunning of animals, and the current sort of push to have all animals stunned prior to slaughter, and do the religious get a dispensation on animal cruelty. So that's the question I would like to see discussed initially before we get on to the fart and tit jokes.
Also, another one I'd like to talk about on my post show is Peter.
What about Peter?
What was it? Is it the
people theatrical treatment of animals?
Oh, PETA.
Yeah.
PETA. Yeah.
Who are the
animals.
who have some perfectly good ideas in many cases, but they consider dogs for the blind, and you owning a cat is bad. That they're enslaved. Right, you're owning a cat is slavery.
I mean, there's certainly
cat is slavery for the owner.
I did a radio show about attitudes to vegetarians, and I talked to a scientist who'd actually studied. A psychologist who studied attitudes to vegetarians. She'd asked people a bunch of questions about what they thought of vegetarians. They did a word association, and then she got a panel to rank the terms, positive to negative. And one of the terms was ranked negatively was Peter. Now, I'm going to have to sign off before we get into your part of the show, because it's 2 o'clock in the morning.
Sorry about that.
Which is a pity, because I know... I mean, obviously, I know a bit more about Peter. I know people who work there, and the controversies around them within the animal movement. I wasn't aware that they were. I mean, they have sites about how to look after your pet. I wasn't aware that they were viewing cat ownership as slavery. I mean, maybe in an ideal world they would rather. They probably do say that in an ideal world we wouldn't have these
companion animals,
these bred animals that only happen that only exist for human needs, but and that have been bred actually. An interesting side point is that when we've bred our dogs to look to be more sociable and friendly, in other words, not stay more puppyish, they've also become visually more puppyish. They've actually adopted more neotenous features. That's beside the point. But yes, Peter. I mean, there's lots to say about Peter, but if that's your starting point, then I should probably just say on Peter that it's an organisation with a very concentrated leadership at the top, and hence does lots of different things, which and certainly there are lots of people in the animal movement who have different opinions about the different things that Peter does. In some ways, I think my feeling is that you almost need to think of Peter as a bunch of different organisations. Certainly, the bit of Peter that does does animal shelters that aren't no-kill shelters should probably be different from the bit that goes out, or a different organisation entirely, from going out and campaigning to talk people into going vegan. But I should probably say goodbye. But is there anything else Is there anything else you need me for before I say goodbye?
No, I think that's wonderful, Ian, and I really do thank you for coming on, and I thank Petrina for introducing us. And certainly I'm sure, like several of our other shows, because we like to focus on small topics like the meaning of life and sex and sexuality, that there will probably be a Us and the Animals Part 2.
At some point.
And certainly I'd like to see how our thoughts on the matter sort of coagulate once given thought, because oftentimes these are things that we haven't really articulated before, and we come back with whole new sets of ideas, and whether or not we'll find that any of us have made a change, or that Maui stopped being a dick to the animals. He's like, no, not going to happen. We shall see, but I would certainly welcome you back on round 2 if you can put up with us being such obnoxious pains in the arse and stuff.
That would be fantastic. Is it appropriate for me to say where people can find out more about it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, by all means, and certainly we can post any links you have into the comment section for where everyone sort of twitters on about this.
Yeah, but feel free to. Where can people find more about what you do then?
Okay, well, I make a show called The Vegan Option, which is essentially vegan radio documentaries from vegan perspectives. So I've covered raising people vegan and lamb meat and a couple of other topics that have come up here. And obviously, if people have listened to the discussion and thought, well, I really want to take my connection with animals into trying to reduce my impact on them. Obviously, everyone knows how to use Google, but there are tons of organisations and books that help people to to go vegan for their pledges for a month or for 6 weeks, just to stick a toe in. And thank you. So thank you. It's been a really interesting conversation.
Thank you for joining us.
We appreciate it.
Thanks for putting up with us, Ian.
Thank you for putting up for him. We're with him.
Us, Cat. Us.
No, you.
Chris.
Live long and prosper.
Thank you. So I think that's a good time to draw the show now to a close.
You can't do it.
Mark, what am I saying, Mark? I'm really tired now. Mr. Jumper will post a link shortly. Go over to Cliff Jumper 24. Oh, it's already done, is it? Oh, look at him.
Not quite, but there it is there.
There it is. Okay, so yeah, if you go over to Cliff Jumper 24 on the channels, you should be subscribed, watchers. You should be. So yeah, go and join people over there, and that's where the next stage will happen.
Yep, I shall go and do that now. See you in a few minutes.
I will bite my tongue to not discuss anymore, so that we can go straight into the after show.
Yes. Okay. So, and on that bombshell, then I'm going to draw the broadcast part to a close. Thanks for sticking with it. It's been quite a long one tonight. So, does anybody, before we finish, does anybody have any final words they want to say?
I do have something to add. Fee, can you actually get to our chat window and post the link I sent you, because I think that's the perfect ending image for the evening.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah. I've just actually shared it on my Facebook.
What is the image?
Well, hold on a minute. I'm having Facebook is everything's really slow tonight. I don't know why.
It's because the internet's very excited about the departure of a certain person.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, right?
And nobody's talking about anything else. It's like the end of Return of the Jedi, and everybody's celebrating. There's fireworks going off everywhere.
Right, here we go. This is on to. Let's see,
That's the only problem with me not being. There we go. Can you use that to share as we go out while you're trying to kill the
Stick it into you. Oh, I can't put.
Oh, there we go. Yes, that is the perfect image to finish. I can do it. It's good. We're cool. It's cool.
In the great question of whether or not companion animals or prey animals will have the last laugh, I think we've got an answer.
We have.
Yeah, but that's because horses have got the brains the size of a lemon.
Oh, we've got a new link from Dave. I will post it into the side here. He says, scratch that link. I'll give you the new link. So hold on, copy. I'll send that over. There we go. I've posted that into the side chat for the after show. So anyway, thanks you for sticking by us.
And we'll see you in the after show.
I don't know what our next topic's going to be. Oh, that was one more thing.
Wait, we did.
One more thing.
Dave Cliff has requested, because he's going to be away over various weekends over this next month, he's requested that we pull the show forward a week so that we hop into being kind of available next week and then go to a fortnight after that. Would that work for people?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've already suggested the topic, if you remember, is medical ethics.
Oh, medical ethics and
we may be bringing in someone who's discussing circumcision and vax and pro-vax and anti-vax and all that good stuff.
Oh, I'll be there for anything to do with Wakefield.
Yeah, that'll be a good one, I think.
Can you imagine our conversation on this one?
Yeah,
it'll be
I think
fun.
that'll be a good one. So we're talking about medical ethics and stuff. So that'll be good. Again, all the small topics that we go for. So anyway, that's the end of the show. So thanks for watching. Bye bye. And we're going to be off air in a moment.